Hello, love. How are you? So, today I want to talk to you about the path of love. You are a spirit in a body having an experience on earth. That's it. The thing that separates us from the other living things on earth is that we have this big brain where we can choose to not be a spirit led body. We can end up being a body led spirit. So you are a piece of that loving energy that bursts into an untold number of pieces. You are a piece of the whole. The body is the vessel that allows that spirit to exist and have this experience on earth. Psychology is the study of emotion, behavior, and cognition. Really, what psychology is the interfacing, the ways in which the spirit interfaces with the body to allow us to have this experience on earth. Ideally, you use your brain. Of course, your body allows you to move and do all the things that you do. You use your brain to process the information that you receive in that movement, in that being on earth, the things that you see, things that you hear, taste, smell, all that good stuff, the sensory processing. And then you have your brain to help you figure out what you need to figure out, the problem solving that you need to do to survive and then thrive. So ideally, that's what happens. Your spirit moves through the body, and that really is what your emotions are. And our emotions are akin to just the inherent instinctual knowing that the other animals live through, right? So they just live through their spiritual knowing. Um, that spirit comes to a body, and all that dictates that animals experience on earth, right? We, because we have this big brain, we can choose not to use our brain as just a sensory processor and a problem solver. And I don't know how it comes about, but some of us have a greater capacity to restrict our emotion, to restrict that inherent connection that we have to every living thing. We can choose not to feel sometimes if we so, some of us can. Um, and some of us just have a greater capacity to do so than others of us. And so love is who you are, and ego is who you think you are. So the way that those individuals restrict their emotion is through their thought process, through their thinking. And so they can use various cognitive techniques. Sometimes we restrict our emotion because our survival depends on it. We hear about dissociation and things of that nature. And then it becomes, sometimes it's something that you started doing so early in your life, something you discovered, that it's become so habituated, your brain just automatically does it. But once your brain gets into a habit or has the ability to restrict emotion, that's when you end up with an ego. And for most people, they're going to have some degree of an ego. But when you start to not live through the spiritual being that you are, ideally, we're taking in this sensory information, we're having an experiences, good experience, feel great. They give us some insight into, oh, okay, this is good for me. I like this. Or we have experiences and we don't like it. Oh, okay, well, this don't work for me. And so of course you do more of the things that you enjoy, you do less of the things that you don't. And then you come to understand who you are through these experiences that you have in your experience on earth. But if you are getting further and further away from your emotional knowing, that thing that as you have experienced, that understanding that you gain about who you are through your emotional experience, and more you're just thinking through life, well, you're very much victim to the context in which your experiences are occurring, right? Um, and that's so much of what has gotten us into the place that we're in, because you are in an environment, you are in a context that is not natural, that actually rewards people who have chosen to live through thinking more than live through their emotional knowing, their inherent understanding that your spirit gives you to a certain extent, just because that's how it works on earth. Um, and so when I talk about the path of love, we are social beings. You come into existence because two people procreated and now you're here. You're automatically in a relationship with someone because as human beings, we're helpless. We can't do anything alone. In order to survive the neonatal period, you need the support of other human beings. And so we are relational beings. You are in some sort of relationship. You have some, even if you're not, those rare cases where people are abandoned, you knew somebody took care of you or you wouldn't have survived, right? And so even in that, there's a void of this knowing that you are supposed to be in some sort of relationship. So the path of love really is a relational agreement, because in coming into a human body, we can just decide that we're not going to live through the love that we are. We can just decide that. And certainly, as time goes on, it's getting harder and harder to just be oblivious to the ways in which you're choosing not to be a loving human being, right? And so the path of love is really an agreement that you make with other human beings, whether they agree to it as well. But I'm going to treat you as another child of God. I'm going to treat you like you are a manifestation of the Creator on earth. And so, at the very least, I'm going to do unto you as I would want done unto me. I'm going to deal with you with a certain level of respect, and I'm going to hold you accountable, because that is how we build a loving system. As if every person made a commitment to treat others the way that they would want to be treated, and learn, because this is not easy. It is not easy to be the love that you are all the time. It's a journey. That's why it's the path of love. This is a journey. This is a commitment that you make to you in terms of how you are going to treat your fellow human beings. And it's once you are more and more living through that expression of the love that you are, that you really come to see the ways in which you are not loving. And then that becomes a pathway for you to really begin to see and make adjustments so that you can be a more loving human being. So it's a process, it takes time, right? And so we are living in a context that is not natural. The United Divided States is not a loving society. the United Divided States is a money making system that's posing as a society. We are all in relationship with one another. And so the individuals that perpetuate a continuation of the United Divided States existing as it has always existed, which is not based in love, is to cease to exist. It's just not tenable. It's just not sustainable. It's not working. And so what we're seeing is that as it becomes more and more clear what loving human behavior looks like, it makes it that much more blaring the ways in which the United Divided States is not a loving society. And to be quite honest, a society, a true society is loving. It's functional. The United Divided States, the goal of the United Divided States is to make money. But the goal of existence on earth, as the Creator intended, is for us to perpetuate life. And so the United Divided States needs to become the United States, right? They were selling something, but it was false advertising. But they wrote what they wrote down, what they sold us, that would be great. We could do that. And if each person in the United Divided States, if each person in this region of earth that we call the United Divided States, if a majority of the people made a commitment to do unto others as they would want done unto them, to stop living in a fantasy world, to stop perpetuating a lie that somehow some people are just able to treat other people like shit and it's okay because they're them. And it's just, it's ridiculous. It's really the level of ridiculousness, diversion, and just all the things at this point. It's it's all consistent with the way that this has been playing out for a very, 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 very long time. That the universe allowed ill-intended folk to create a system that is so tempting with, I call it baubles, trinkets, and candy, that those who are less sophisticated from an emotional and spiritual standpoint and are just left to be driven by the body led spirits, are going to find it very difficult to resist baubles, trinkets, and candy. And so this is really uh, what has happened. Um, and it's only as folks are being forced to have to be confronted with their lack of spiritual and emotional sophistication that they can ever get to a point where they can admit, right? That's a part of the path of love. I need to be able to admit that there's an issue or there's a shortcoming so that I begin to make the adjustment and you know, try to do what is pretty well outlined. If you're familiar with some of my other work, what love does and what ego or no love does. Very different things. And it's become clearer and clearer that some people are operating from a place of no love and some people are operating from a place of love. Um, And so that's basically it. It's, I wish that, I had people that, had questions and I could answer specific questions. It's kind of hard to talk about these things just in a one-way conversation, and I'm just trying to give you some relevant information. But, I think that's sufficient in terms of a broad overview of what this is about. I mean, this is about a choice. Like when I think about what the life giver, I think that's what this was all about. Like he made a choice to do this thing, but true freedom, true free will is the ability to make your own choice. And in the other bodies that we came into, for the most part, their intellectual prowess is such that it's difficult for them to go beyond um, what the spirit is driven to do, right? But in our case, and I think that's what this whole experiment has been about, to create a being who can make their own choice. And so it's just such a beautiful gift. And, we've been given the free will to do this, but yeah, like you really got to choose it. That the universe has allowed a being to create a system that is so manipulative and so uses your natural inherent evolutionary makeup to entrap you in a trick. And when you look at how a lot of the system works, it very much is, using your fear of natural things, of losing natural things, of losing certain connections, just the way the court system is set up in terms of families, and this idea that one person can have the child and the other person can, and just that there's just so many ways in which, just the whole way that child protective services or the the health system, in so many ways is really an area where you're allowed to be terrorized, because you're dealing with the most fundamental ways in which you need to survive, and the ways that make you human. To put those things at threat in a context where they're supposedly helping you. We could just go on and on. But that's the path of love. I have 33 truths to consider and live by, where I talk about the difference between what love does and what ego does. And you can find that at on YouTube at Dr. Nikki Four, the OOU. It's the hummingbird um, profile picture. Um, and so I think, I wanted to give this background before going into more about surrender and the difficulty that it could be, particularly in a trick, to actually walk on the path of love and do so consistently. Um, and so, given some of the things that have been going on, I just ask people of Alkebulan ancestry, the trick that has been played on us and continues to be played on us, um, in terms of a willingness to let you suffer under a lie about who you really are. It's so evil and such a travesty. And so, and I think about my brothers, and I think about what they've had to endure from a standpoint of feeling your greatness, feeling uh, your power, and to almost be caged, right, in a trick that really limits you in terms of expressing who you really are, because it's such a threat. Um, at the same time, as a trick will do, it's going to reward you, right, in the ways that create division and issue within our community. And so, um, if you think that a European male is the fake paragon of human existence, and you think that the way that that is expressed is that I get to get away with shit that other motherfuckers don't. You get caught up in that thing, and it's a subconscious thing that I think my brothers struggle with, is they so want to get away with some shit that a European male can get away with in a trick. And so that's what I need my brothers to understand. You are as great as you believe you to be, but you can't have it both ways. So you either want to grow up and be the emotional being, the spiritual being that you are, because that a European male has capacity to restrict his emotion that you don't have. And he has used that against you for hundreds of years. Because if you had the capacity to restrict your emotion that he does, your skin would be pale. This is how deep this runs, okay? And so I need my brothers to understand it is up to y'all to help us understand how a loving male exists on earth. A loving male who has come into the human form exists on earth. We need you to lead the way on this, right? Because a bitch who still believes in Santa Claus can't tell me shit. So if you know you dealing with a motherfucker who still thinks he's white, that motherfucker is dumb as fuck. He couldn't tell me a motherfucking thing. He ain't a model for a motherfucking thing when it comes to me. Okay. So that's good. I'll be trying not to run long, but so for your homework assignment, so we're a colony of humanity. So it's good for you to know more about your nest, right? And so you're a spirit in a vessel. And so I need you to learn more about your vessel. And so, start to get familiar with, get a good anatomy app, an anatomy book, have your kids, you should have an anatomy book at the house. So you can just look at, what the Lord has done, learn, basic understanding of the basics, the main systems of your vessel, of the body. And I think in these videos and just me asking you to explore nature, explore what the Lord has done, once again, you see the trick that's been played on you. Because why is this not taught in school? Why do you not have a basic understanding of your very existence and the context in which that existence happens? Right. And so I want you to look at the body, at anatomy. And I also want you to look at a side by side comparison of the embryos of different species, including Homo sapiens. Okay, and I'll check in with you about that when I see you next time. So, who do I belong to? That's right. I love you. And like I said before, this is a gift. Let us enjoy.